Now, before we continue, before I share the screen, before we continue or before we start with the session, I would just like to give you a bit of background so that you can have an idea. And I feel it's part of integrity and credibility check for you to know whom you are speaking to, and as well as my experience around project proposal. I've been working in projects for a very large proportion of my career, that is more than 15 years. I started my career with the government of the Republic of Namibia, and I branched out into the private sector, where I worked in the mining industry and the fishing industry respectively, and the retail sector as well. And then I branched into the international donor agency sector, where I worked with International Training Center for Health and HIV, where I was responsible also for training healthcare workers. And then also I worked still in the international national NGO sector with the International Labour Organization on child labor projects. And then I later branched out. I also worked with Family Health International, PSI. And then I later also joined the SOS Children's Villages at directorate level, and then also some other organizations as well. Just to give you an indication, in all my career, I was either in charge of the organization or in charge of projects, huge projects as well. Now, for you to understand, we're talking project proposal writing. That was my focus for the past few years, or for the past few days, I'm sorry, for you to understand the difference between a program and a project. Some of you work on programs. Program is a combination of many projects. A program is long-term. A project has got a beginning or starting date and an end date. And we will talk more about that when it comes to project management. But just for you to understand, we are talking of project proposal writing. So this is my third day, and thank you. I've given you so much information so far, and thank you for your patience. And today I'm going to sort of summarize what we've done so far so that you can have a clearer picture of what we have been dealing with. So on the first day, we spoke of what is a proposal, but in the context of a project. We spoke of international donor agencies. We spoke of a private sector and the themes of the type of programs and issues that could be funded in development. And then we also went through the successful proposal writing process. Now, within the process, there's that which you write and that which you do for the process to be successful. Somebody kept asking me on the first night and the second night, how many steps are there in the process? And I deliberately did not conclude on that because I needed us to see how we get to the end of the process. So for some of us, there may be one or two more steps depending on the way you do it or depending on the requirements of the donor. But it could be roughly between 10 and 12 steps. So first of all, we said you must do thorough research. That is what was day one. And you must understand the application or the application process. And we spoke of eligibility criteria. You must find out if you are eligible, otherwise you cannot continue. Yesterday, we spoke of planning, and we said clearly outline the project plan. And we spoke of tailor your outcomes. And we also spoke of showcase expected impact and outcomes. And you showcasing for the donor. And remember, we said always write and prepare for the end reader. I like to use the word end reader in mind. In other words, the individual that you are communicating to or the donor. And then also we ended with develop a realistic, detailed budget or proposal, budget proposal or proposed budget. Now today, we are going a step further, and we are also going to look at, okay, this is, let's see. Yes, today we're going a step further and we are going to look at long-term viability and sustainability. This is still what you are writing in your project proposal. And then we are going to look at the review process after you have written the basic proposal. And then we will look at meeting the deadlines for submission. And then we will look at the follow-up process, after which we will talk about the proposals, or we will look at sample proposals and concept notes as well. So the reason why I'm giving it to you in this format is I want you to realize the importance of each and every step within the process. If you do not have these steps within the process, then your proposal might not be successful. Somebody asked yesterday, could it still be successful without one of the elements? One of my experiences that I have with individuals that submit proposals, sometimes you don't have number 9 or you don't have number 7 in the review process, but when one reads through it, you'll find that it is embedded within a different part of the process. And that is where donors will come back to you and say, we need more information on this, we need more information on this, and you respond accordingly. So that in a nutshell, your different steps in the process. Now, number 7, we're continuing. We ended with budgeting yesterday. We're continuing and we're saying long-term viability and sustainability. I'm telling you, I'm asking you to present this or to indicate this within your project. Now, the long-term, or you develop the long-term plan and outlining within this plan how you will sustain the project beyond the initial funding period. In other words, you are going to look at or indicate unto me the project from the beginning throughout the process. What are we saying? If the funding is 3 years and your project is a 5-year project, you should be able to indicate unto me what happens after the 3rd year. In a project proposal, there is an area that we call assumptions. So within the assumptions, you'll be able to tell me. And then also this could include strategies for generating revenue, securing partnerships or sponsorships, or establishing a sustainable business model or sustainable project model. Generating revenue could be, you might be doing trainings on the side through which you will now get more funding so that you can sustain individuals or project officials further or beyond the 3 years that we are referring to. Or securing partnerships, you can say in year 2, we are partnering with organization X because this particular function that comes from maybe the mental health component that we now need within our project starts in year 2, and this is the organization that deals with that. So in year 2, we partner with them, and for 3 years, for another 3 years. In other words, you are now in year 2 of 3 years. So within the last year, you integrate and you go beyond that. So this is what we want to see as donors. Remember, one of the successes or the key elements is donors do not want to fund organizations that cannot indicate funding beyond the project lifespan or the funding cycle. Very important. I can have money for your project for 3 years, but if you cannot tell me what you are doing after the 3rd year, you might not get the fund. Then also demonstrate community support. Show that there is community support for your project and that it will address a real need or problem. This could include testimonials from community members or letters of support from local leaders or organizations. This tells us that if it's a community that is if it's a project that is in the interest and the need of the community, your gatekeepers or your community leaders will be involved. You have meetings with them and you make them aware that such a project is coming up, and they should indicate the quality of support that they will give you throughout this project. So that is 2 steps within your long-term viability. And then continuing with this, you will also look at highlighting the potential impact of your project and how will it benefit the community in the long term. This could include economic benefit, social benefit, or environmental benefits. For example, you can indicate that at this moment, it's an education project that we are looking at, and there's a certain percentage of young people that cannot go into school because of the lack of whatever your project needs to provide. But then you will turn, in the long term, we will say there's an increase of young people entering school at a certain age from this percentage, that your 10% to 100% or to 90%. That is the increase in the long term. Remember, we spoke of goals, and goals also indicate your long-term goals. And this could also include economic benefits. For example, if it's a project that targets livelihoods of individuals, you are going to see the economic benefits. You know, like in a family strengthening program that targets livelihoods, the economic benefits there would be, you'll be training people in income generating activities. You'll be training them how to start up with whatever they are trained in, and you will be indicating the quality of funds they will be getting from your project, which will be a startup fund. And you'll also be indicating that these individuals will get this fund for the next 2 years on a monthly basis. And after those 2 years, they will be self-sustained. Then you need to indicate, the number of individuals that will be self-sustained after the end of the project lifespan. And then also discuss scalability, discuss how your project can be scaled up or replicated in other communities or areas. This will show that your project has the potential to have a broader impact beyond the initial funding period. Very important. How do you indicate or discuss the scalability? You need to get to show us how you will collect data. Maybe you have a data officer, but you will have a monitoring and evaluation program and a framework as well, which will be part of this project that you are writing. Remember, we see it must be a full long-term plan that you are indicating at this stage. So you indicate how you will monitor the project on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis, and the reports that come out of that. You will also indicate at which part of the project will you do a midterm evaluation, but you will also see how you will do best practices. Now, the secret with best practices is you cannot yet look at best practices in the beginning of a project. In a 3-year project, it's only in year 3 where you can now indicate best practices. However, if you work with open eyes in your project, we call it your eyes and your ears on the ground, you'll be able to identify emerging good practices. These are simply practices that are so beneficial that you yourself feel that I can replicate it in a different community. So this is what we are looking at first when we want to talk about scalability. If I see something within your project that can be scalable and can be replicated in other communities, it is already an indication that this makes sense and it needs funding. And then also, use data and metrics. I just spoke about data. You use data to measure the impact of your project over time, and this will help you demonstrate the long-term viability and sustainability. But remember, now we are still at the writing process. So you use existing data of another project or another model that you have, or you use statistics. So this is what we are speaking of when we say long-term viability and sustainability. And then to continue your next process now, you are now going to look, that is number 7. Number 8, you are now going to review whatever you have put into this proposal or into the process of writing the proposal. What am I saying? When you review, you first review the guidelines. Remember, go back to your guidelines. It's like writing an exam. When you are done, or while you are writing, sometimes one feel uncertain, you always check, go back to ensure that your proposal meet all the requirements. It will now be like a checklist at this stage. You check eligibility criteria, submission guidelines, everything. You make sure, 100% sure, because sometimes it is possible to derail from what you have started up writing, and you are out of scope at some point, and you might go back to see what you need to correct before you submit such a proposal. And then in your review process still, you check for clarity. Read your proposal carefully. carefully to ensure that it is clear and easy to understand. I always recommend a reading committee. The same committee can be the reading committee as well. The only thing you need to do, if you do not have so many people on your project, once you are done with the writing process, which can be very strenuous, it takes a lot of days, you are tired, you park your document and you clear your mind by either waiting for a day or two, because it could be a draft, it could be a zero draft, and then you all come back with fresh minds, and then you now read your proposal. Okay, and when you read, you do it the way I present to you. I sit in the seat of the donor and I speak to you, the recipient of this fund. So you read it like such. And then you can also, somebody was asking yesterday, can you give it to another organization? It should not be an organization that are competing or tendering for the same funding, unless it is a partner and you two are doing the same proposal. But you take care of your proposal, because at this stage, it is an infant that you are nourishing in order for this infant to qualify for a next level, to be weaned into something. Then remove any jargon or technical terms that may confuse the reader, and make sure that your proposal is written in plain language. Remember, plain language. If you listen to me as I'm speaking, I prefer to use very plain language. The secret to high levels of education is not, huge terms. It is making it understandable to the end recipient of information. So write it in plain language, because when it goes to donors, there are different people at different angles that gets to read a portion within the proposal. The monitoring and evaluation officers read their part. The finance individuals read the budget has got. The budget has got its technical or its financial and its narrative as well. So, and the person that read the project component. So everyone need to understand when they sit around the table. Nobody should be able to say, I can't understand what this means. And how do you make it plain? If you struggle to make it plain, and there are words that you feel they need to understand, then you clarify it in your explanation. Coherency is very important. Your proposal should be coherent and flow logically. Now, what you are going to do when you are reading through your proposal, you look at the paragraphs and the different chapters that follow in the proposal, or the different steps. The first step should always conclude itself and introduce the next step. There should always be a conclusion and that introduce the next step. And that is how we say it flows logically. But logical flow is also in your explanation. What do you explain? For example, if it's a research proposal and there is a literature review, in your literature review, you always want to start with an explanation of global statistics. And then you come to your continental, and then you come to your regional statistic, and you end up where you are. And this could be one, two sentences each. But what we are looking for is the logic, the flow of logic. Make sure that each section of your proposal is connected to the overall proposal. That is also another secret. Each part, your review or your plan, your whatever, must speak to the overall proposal, and that there are no gaps in consistencies. It should be no gaps or inconsistencies. So your language is consistent, your sentences, your flow, everything. So you must make sure that you use the same words of that which you are presenting the proposal with. Some people will talk in one thing about HIV and AIDS, and then in another paragraph they want to talk of people living with, your abbreviations should be consistent as well. And remember, every abbreviation is introduced in the beginning. Edit for grammar and spelling. Edit for grammar and spelling. Bearing in mind that none of us were born English, unless you grow up in an English country and you don't know any other language. So you always edit for grammar and spelling. It is just an issue of integrity and excellence as well. And then, okay, we've mentioned that. Get feedback from someone else, such as a colleague or a mentor, to ensure that your proposal is clear, coherent, and complies with the guidelines. So what we normally do is, when we are the team that has been sitting on a proposal and it's been a tedious process, what we do is we now come together and bring either an external collaborator or an individual with us, so that we can also get such input. And sometimes we do it in the form of a workshop if it is a long proposal. Make sure to follow the instructions for submission very carefully. This is important because many people write good proposals and they falter in the instructions. If you fail in the instruction, your proposal might not get an audience as well. And then double check that you have included all the required documents that you have submitted your proposal before the deadline. Now remember, when you want to request for funding, there's a key requirement. You are either registered or you are registered within your organization, within your country as an organization or a CBO, NGO, whatever you are. That is a key requirement from donors. Or you are part of a consortium partnership of which the principal recipient or the lead organization is registered. That is a requirement. They want a registration number. They want financial records. They want sometimes auditing reports. Or if it is a new, there are organizations that will tell you, if it's your first time, please submit. And that means they have a unit within the organization, the international organization,
I'm sorry, Madam
that
Mulamata, the
only
slide is
helps
not moving.
CBOs and NGOs that are starting up. So they will train you, they will give you guidelines, everything. So it's very important. In that case, when you submit, make sure that when you give institutional memory, remember we said, go back to your previous projects or your previous work, you submit pictures of your work. You submit pictures of the location. If you do not have a location as yet of where you want to set up the project. So these are all the things that must be included. But the statutory requirements or the statutory documents, which means the legal documents, are most important. Sometimes if you have a board, they will ask you for a list of board members as well, but they will always ask you for financial history. They will ask who are your other donors. They will ask your registration numbers. So these are important. In some cases, they will ask tax number to make sure that you are paying taxes. And unless you are a tax exempted organization, they will ask for proof of that as well. Now, this is not a cumbersome process. All you need to do is to get such information. And this will increase your chances of success in obtaining funding for your project. So now at this stage, you are reviewing, did I submit that? Do I have that document? And sometimes they are telling you, give us 1 year's financial report. Don't give them 10 years reports if they ask you for 1 year. Now, this is telling us that there need to be some integrity and some up-to-date information and reports in our organization perpetually kept, so that donors are able to get such information. I'm seeing somebody saying the slides are not moving. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry for that. On my side, it is moving. So can you just write in the chat if there's any movement at this point? I'm trying to scroll. Is there any movement at this point? Oops. Perhaps it's the network. So please try to bear with me, or let me stop sharing and then I share again. I'm so sorry for that. We are talking about reviewing your proposal while you are preparing to submit. I am going to share this screen again, then we will see. Let me do a new share. It normally takes just a few seconds. I don't know what is happening. Wow.
It's okay. It's okay.
All right. Can you see the slides now? We can see it now. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm going to try to speak louder. It is raining this side, and that is why the volume is not the same. But thank you for that feedback. We were talking about reviewing your proposal just for the sake of getting us all on par. What I said is, now that you have written your proposal, you want to review whether you've done everything that you ought to do. So what we are saying is, you must first review the guidelines to make sure that you followed everything. That was first. Secondly, you must check for clarity. You read through your proposal, and you can also get a team that sit down reading with you. If there's no separate team, then you use the same team. Provided that you people take a rest and then you come back, because we all know what it's like to work with thick documents. When we have done or completed with a document, there's a relief, but you are so overwhelmed, you will not be able to do corrections immediately. So you can have a 1 or 2 days workshop, sit down again fresh and read through the proposal. And then the next step is removing jargon or technical terms. What we are literally saying is just correct the language. And then you must ensure coherence. The proposal should be coherent, and there should be a very logical flow in your proposal. The logical flow will help us to make sense. Make sure that each section of the proposal is connected to the overall proposal. Sometimes we lose track, so you need to make sure of that. We already said edit for spelling and grammar, and get feedback from someone else. Bring in an external collaborator, which could be a consultant or just an individual that is a support to your project, not a different organization, please, not at this stage. So make sure you follow the instructions for submission very, very carefully. And here, I just want us to say the important issue here with following instructions. They will tell you it must be in by this hour. They will also tell you you must your document should be Times New Roman, the font 12 Times New Roman, the size of the font is 12, and they will also say where you should submit it, and all the different instructions. And they can say maybe 2 copies or save a copy and whatever. Sometimes they will say write your organization's name, and then they will say the abbreviations that should be with it and the date and whatever. Those are the details, because remember, sometimes you will discover that you are 1 out of 100 or 1,000 applicants for this particular proposal or for this particular fund. So the instructions are so important. That's the value of following the review process. And then also, double check that you have included all the documents. We spoke of the statutory requirements, the legal documents. And in addition to the legal documents, they may ask CVs of those that will be involved in the project. I remember in the large organizations, the huge projects, when we ask for millions of dollars of funding, they will ask you, they want to know the director of the project. They want the CV of the individual. They want the CV of your monitoring and evaluation officer, the CV of your finance officer. Sometimes they ask for that. And sometimes they ask for previous work done or carried out by this project as well. So yes, and it will increase your chances. Tonight, I'm sharing with you an example of projects. And this one, even though it is in a rough draft, it's called a working document, a project that I was once just, prompted to apply and search around. And one of the organizations that I wrote an email to actually came back, and they sent us a template. And we just filled out the template. A template is easy because the steps are outlined. It's indicated. You just feed in the information. And we were asking them for 200,000, but we actually got 1.5 million from this project. And it was not just a 1.5 million, it was an annual amount that they gave every year. They gave that 1.5 million. And so it's an ongoing project. It was an education. So I'm going to give you an example. Please don't copy paste it. Just make use of the structure and the technicalities that is in it, and maybe of some of the information that you need for your own project. Because if you copy paste, it's not your brain that is on the project. You will struggle with execution. You might have a good proposal and you will be stuck on execution. Now, when you are done with your review of your document, you need to meet the deadline for submission. Very important. Proposals that are submitted late, given attention. When they tell you that the deadline is extended, it's not